bought a new laptop this week. My trusty old machine died over last weekend, and I spent several days trying to coax it back to life to no avail. Thus, it was that I sat in front of my new laptop on Friday morning, clicking and accepting the terms of agreement for multiple pieces of software. I trust most of you are familiar with this experience. I'm asked to read and comprehend page after page of legalese intended to cover each corporation from legal action, and then to click the little box saying, "I have read this document and understand what it says." After accepting and clicking, I am then allowed to download and use the product. I will confess. You know what I'm going to confess, don't you? Because you all have done it too. I did not read all of the documents all the way through every time. I've read through enough of them to know the gist of what they're saying, and after the fourth or fifth product installment, I had the sudden hesitant thought, wait, what exactly am I agreeing to? On the surface, I know the answer. I just signed up for Zoom and Adobe PDF Editor and so on. Like, I downloaded my Enya CD again. I've been using, without concern, these various pieces of software for years. And still, I had that moment, just after clicking on one of those buttons, what did I just agree to? Of course, it got me thinking of all the other places in life where we have these agreements and how we may or may not pay attention to the small print of the situation. But you know, it's only business transactions that have actual fine print all spelled out. When you joined this congregation, for example, we have you sign the membership book, but we don't give you an extra page of legal provisos and addendums about what it means. You don't have fine print spelling out the implications. What we have here is covenant. Now, you have heard me say before that Unitarian Universalism is a little different from most other religious communities, and our reliance on covenant is part of it. Often what I say is that we're centered around values rather than beliefs. We don't have a creed or a statement of belief that everybody has to agree to before they click and accept the terms of agreement as they join. We instead have values. And this is a helpful distinction when we're talking with other people about Unitarian Universalism. When we are asked what we believe here, we can respond saying, "That's the wrong question." Instead of all believing the same thing, we have shared values at our center. Here's the trick, however. We don't simply swap a list of beliefs for a list of values that we all have to accept. The new Article 2 statement, which is set to replace our 7 principles as an official definition of Unitarian Universalism, lists the following core values: equality, interdependence, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, and liberating love. It is more explicitly a list of values compared to what we have in our current principles. However, and this is very important, it is still not a list of what we all each must accept and agree to before joining a UU congregation. It's easier to explain Unitarian Universalism to someone using the idea of values instead of beliefs. And it's not wrong to frame it that way, but to really get at the heart of what's going on in our congregations, to really understand the terms of agreement that you click and accept when you're joining, to really know what you just agreed to when you signed the membership book, we need to talk about covenant. Covenant is about how we agree to be with each other in our community. Here's a working definition I found that I like. Covenant is a mutual sacred promise between individuals or groups to stay in relationship, care about one another, and work together in good faith. All groups must navigate the interplay of the individual in community. Some groups overemphasize the individual, while other groups lean more strongly toward community. Historically, our Unitarian Universalist communities have a strong preference to lean toward the individual. Freedom of the individual conscience, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of each person, making sure there's space for each voice. This is all an effort to lift the individual. We also are a community. And while we each are on our own path, we are traveling together, supporting each other in our journeys. Covenant is the concept we use to hold each other together. We are seekers first, always open to new learning, new insight, new understanding. And the best avenue that we have found is to be seekers in community. The covenant of respect and mutual care is that framework that provides the freedom that we long for and the best boundaries possible for being in community together as individuals. Yes, we have shared values, but we don't need to necessarily agree on the exact language or the exact values that are in that list or the order in which they appear. Yes, the values are important. But more than that, what matters for us is how we are in conversation about our shared values. I find that calling us covenanted seekers is a more accurate way to define Unitarian Universalism than to say that we're a community bound by shared values. Because the covenant is what holds us in our shared values. It's what keeps us working together on that list of the values that we share. It keeps us together as individuals in community. So we're covenanted seekers, but covenant is such an odd word. It doesn't fit our current language. It doesn't roll off the tongue when you're walking down the street with someone. Most folks will glaze over a bit if you dropped that word into the conversation. It's a statement of relationship, and it's actually a very old idea. The song that we sang earlier, "Where You Go, I Will Go," is a covenantal reference to the book of Ruth. Covenant has a significant starting point in Hebrew scripture. We can talk about Noah or Abraham, Moses certainly, and David. In each of these cases, however, the specifics of the concept, the details of how it was worked out, it doesn't always apply to how covenant works with us today, but it remains a good starting point and a solid reference for comparison. Let me explain just a little bit. In Hebrew scripture, God is like a king setting the terms of the agreements. The people can accept them or not, but there is no room for negotiation or amendments or alterations. There wasn't a process of voting when the Ten Commandments came down. The king sets the terms of the agreement, and the people in the kingdom just accept them. And that's the way that they used an image to talk about covenant with God. In these biblical stories, God was a character in the events with whom the Israelites would enter into covenant. God would make a promise to not destroy the inhabitants of the earth or send another flood, to use Noah's example, or to bring forth a great nation, in Abraham's example. God made certain promises to the people if the people would agree to abide by God's law. I will be your people, I will be your God, and you will be my people. It's a relational concept. That part of covenant is clear in these old biblical examples, and it's one of the ways in which we still use covenant in our congregations. However, those biblical ones are a little more one-sided in their experience than what we see in our congregations today. Fast forward a few centuries, and we can find a form of covenantal theology that also follows a model of government, but it's a little bit different. Democracy instead of monarchy. When you shift the government model, there are some implications on the theological model that are quite dramatic. Instead of the holy being vested in a single authority, holiness is found within every person. Modern congregationalism traces its roots to Robert Brown and the English separatists of the late 1500s. Brown gave up on the Church of England and attempted to create a new model of ecclesiology, or rather, in his mind, to recreate an old model based on the early Christian house church gatherings. And here's the interesting stuff that carries forward for us from this history. We Unitarian Universalists have taken the congregational polity pieces to heart and have established our congregations in keeping with those basic tenets of congregationalism from 400 years back, and it radically relocates religious authority from a hierarchy of bishops and priests to the people in the pews. And that is where our ideas of covenant really flourish. There is, as I've outlined, a deep history to our ideas of covenant, but there's also a remarkably contemporary understanding of covenant at play among us. The concept is old, and we use it with a modern spin. The part that I find helpful to remember in the older versions of covenant is that it reminds us that covenant is not strictly about relationships between individuals, between you and me and you and you and you and you. Instead, covenant is a way to talk about the individual's relationship with the community, with us. It's like a marriage. Stick with me for a second. Think about weddings for a moment. The wedding vows in particular. Wedding vows are a form of a covenant. They're often framed as a promise that one individual is making to another individual, but really, those vows are not the individuals making promises to each other. They're vows that are made to the union that they are creating, to the us that happens when they become married. And so it is with a congregational covenant. When you join this congregation, you promise to dwell together in peace and seek the truth and love and to help one another. But that's not a promise you're extending to John and Wendy and Bill. It's a promise that you are making to the congregation as a whole. It's to the us that is the congregation. The covenant, therefore, calls you to consider and treat each individual member of the congregation as you would treat any other member of the congregation. There is a certain basic piece that you automatically offer to every member, not because you like them, certainly not because you know them, because you probably don't all know everyone here, but simply because we are all covered by the same covenantal relationship. It's a theological system that creates relational equity. You treat people well not because you like them, but because you have chosen to be in a covenant with this congregation and what it stands for. A covenant allows us to sustain a community by promising one another mutual trust and support. Part of this is about being kind to each other, as our behavioral covenant asks of us. Part of it is what allows our plurality. I'm seeking on my path of understanding, of finding God, of knowing the meaning of life, and you are seeking on yours, and we don't need to be on the same path to support each other. We don't need to think alike, to love alike. So some of you are in the room who have signed the membership book years and even decades back. And some of you are newer members, and some of you haven't joined yet and never will. And that's fine. And then there are some of you who haven't decided yet, or you're thinking that you might click on and accept the terms of agreement, but you're just not there yet. For you, let me say, there is no official document of our terms of agreement. I'm sorry. You will be asked to make a financial commitment, and you will be asked every year to reconsider that financial commitment. And you will be invited to offer your gifts and talents. And you will be invited to help shape this community as we live our promises together. And you will be held and supported, challenged and persuaded, accepted and inspired. And if you're lucky, occasionally transformed. In short, you will be part of this community, and this community will be yours. And your people are my people. And together we will do what we can to manifest the beloved community together, again and again, week after week. Together. In a world without end, may it be so. Let us join in singing